The oil lamp flickers against the damp stone walls of the tavern, casting a long, wavering shadow that looks nothing like the person you were born to be. Outside, the Bristol docks are a chorus of creaking timber, and the rhythmic, wet slap of the tide against the pier, a sound that feels like a heartbeat slowing down. You sit at a scarred wooden table, the smell of stale ale and unwashed wool clinging to your skin, watching the ink dry on a piece of parchment that carries your father's surname. That name is a dress that never fit, a house with locked windows, a path leading toward a hearth that would eventually turn to ash. You reach out, your fingers trembling only slightly, and push the paper into the gutter of a candle flame. The edges curl and blacken, the letters shriveling until the identity you carried for 20 years is nothing more than a ghost of grey soot rising toward the rafters. It is a quiet, devastating liberation, the kind of ending that leaves a hollow ache in the center of your chest where a future used to live. You stand and walk toward the door, your stride intentionally wider, your shoulders squared under a heavy, stolen coat that smells of wood smoke and old tobacco. The night air is sharp, a blade of Atlantic cold that slices through the warmth of the tavern and reminds you that the world does not care if you survive. As you step onto the cobblestones, the mist wraps around you, blurring the lines of your face until you are just another silhouette in a city of secrets. Go ahead and adjust your pillow. You are going to want to be comfortable for this part. Settle in because the shore is fading now, and the only thing left behind is a memory that no one will ever speak aloud. You are walking toward the seafarer, a brigantine that groans in the darkness like a caged animal, its masts reaching up into a sky so black it feels as though the stars have been extinguished. Every step away from the town is a step into a silence that will become your closest companion, a vow taken in the dark, to never let your true voice rise above a whisper. You feel the weight of the coins in your pocket, the last of your mother's hidden savings, and the cold iron of a small knife tucked into your belt. This is the quiet longing of a woman who wants nothing more than to be invisible, a desire so ordinary it aches because it is the only way to be free. The gangplank beneath your boots is narrow and slick with salt, a bridge between the world of rules and a world of water where your name no longer matters. You look back once at the flickering lights of the harbour, realizing with a sudden, heavy clarity that those lights belong to a century you are leaving behind. The wind catches the sails above, a low, haunting moan that sounds like a door closing on everything you once knew. You are no longer a daughter, a sister, or a bride. You are a shadow among shadows, drifting into the deep. The hold of the ship is a world of cedar and spice, smelling of old rope and the sharp, metallic tang of the bilge water sloshing far below. You sit in the dark, the only light a sliver of grey morning filtering through the hatch, and begin the slow, rhythmic ritual of your transformation. The linen bandages are long and coarse against your skin, and as you wind them tight around your chest, you feel the air in your lungs become a precious, rationed thing. It is a physical constriction that mirrors the life you have chosen, a constant, breathless pressure that reminds you, with every heartbeat, of the price of your survival. You pull a rough woolen tunic over your head, the fabric scratching against your neck, and tuck your hair beneath a weathered tricorn hat until not a single soft line remains. The mirror you carry is only a jagged shard of glass, but in it you see a stranger with eyes that have grown hard and watchful, a person who is the only protector you have left in this world. There is a strange mourning peace in this ritual, a way of folding yourself away like a letter that was never meant to be read. You move through the cramped spaces of the ship with a practiced stiffness, learning to mask the sway of your hips and the lightness of your step until your body moves with the heavy, unhurried gait of the men around you. The ship's carpenter, an old man named Silas with hands like gnarled oak roots, nods to you as you pass, his eyes seeing only another young soul seeking a fortune on the high seas. He does not know that beneath that coat is a heart that beats with a terror so cold it feels like ice, nor does he know that every word you speak is a calculated risk. You learn to lower your voice, letting it rasp in the back of your throat, a sound like gravel turning under a boot. It is a lonely labour, this constant construction of a man out of silence. And shadow, an unremarkable act of endurance that feels as though it might break you if you stop for even a moment. The ship begins to heave as it leaves the shelter of the bay, the wood beneath your feet groaning under the immense weight of the ocean. You feel the scale of the world expanding, the horizon stretching out in every direction until the land is nothing but a thin, dark line that eventually vanishes. This is the weight of time, the realization that for months, perhaps years, this wooden shell will be your entire universe, and there is no turning back. You find yourself staring at the wake of the ship, the white foam churning and then disappearing, much like the person you used to be. The secret you carry is a stone in your pocket, heavy and smooth, and you realize that you are now a ghost inhabiting a living body. You lean against the rail, watching the sun dip toward the water, a golden coin being swallowed by the deep. The deck is beginning to wake, the sound of boots and coarse laughter rising around you like a tide you must learn to swim in. The sky over the Atlantic is an endless, bruising blue, a canopy so vast it makes the seafarer feel like a splinter floating in a basin of ink. Your hands, once soft and accustomed to the gentle textures of lace and flower, are now a map of blisters and salt-crusted cuts that never quite heal. You spend your days learning the complex, tangled grammar of the rigging, the way a clove hitch feels under a thumb, and the violent snap of a sail catching a sudden gale. It is a brutal, sensory education, where the texture of rough hemp rope becomes more familiar than the touch of another human hand. Take one slow breath. We are about to go somewhere very far away. Pull the blanket a little closer because the wind is picking up now and the spray of the ocean is beginning to freeze on the rails. You find a strange grounding rail, Wefim in the labour, a way to vanish into the work until your mind is as empty as the horizon. There is an apprentice on board, a boy no older than 14 named Thomas, who watches you with a mix of awe and desperation. His own hands roar from the unrelenting sea. One afternoon, while the sun is beating down with a dry, merciless heat, you show him how to wrap his palms in scrap leather to keep the ropes from tearing his skin to the bone. It is a small kindness, an unremarkable gesture in the eyes of the crew, but for Thomas it is a lifeline in a world that offers none. He looks at you with a gratitude that aches, unaware that the person protecting him is hiding a vulnerability even deeper than his own. The irony of this life is that you're becoming a master of a craft you were never supposed to touch, gaining a strength that would be considered a sin if the world knew your true name. As the weeks bleed into one another, you begin to understand that the ocean does not care for the laws of men or the expectations of society. It only cares for the strength of the knot and the timing of the helm. You stand at the prow during the midnight watch, the stars reflecting in the black water like 1,000 sunken diamonds, and realize how unimaginably long ago it was that you sat in a garden and dreamed of a different life. That world is a fairy tale told in a language you no longer speak, a distant memory of a girl who feared the dark. Now the dark is your sanctuary, a velvet cloak that hides your features and allows you to breathe without the constriction of your bandages. For a few precious hours, you are becoming part of the ship, your heartbeat syncing with the creak of the hull and the rhythmic sigh of the wind in the canvas. The horizon is no longer a destination, but a promise that as long as you keep moving, you can never be caught. The nights in the mid-Atlantic are quiet, save for the constant, low-frequency hum of the ship moving through the swell and the occasional splash of a leaping fish. You sit on a coil of rope near the stern, the air smelling of salt, and the faint, sweet scent of the captain's Virginia tobacco drifting from the quarterdeck. A sailor named Barnaby, a man with a face like a weathered map and a laugh that sounds like breaking dry sticks, slides down beside you and offers a clay pipe, its bowl still warm from his grip. You take it, the rough clay grounding you, and for a moment the two of you sit in a companionable silence that needs no explanation. It is a flickering sense of belonging, a realization that in this lawless space you are accepted not for who you are, but for the way you hold your weight during a storm. There is a soft, unspoken mercy in being seen as a comrade, a ghost of the intimacy you left behind, reinvented in the shadow of a mast. Barnaby talks about a home he hasn't seen in a decade, a cottage with a blue door and a wife who probably thinks he's at the bottom of the sea, his voice carrying a quiet longing that he would never admit to the rest of the crew. You listen, your head bowed, feeling the weight of the secrets you both carry, like stones in your boots. And for the first time, the isolation of your disguise feels less like a prison. The smoke curls between you, a grey ribbon in the moonlight, blurring the edges of the world until the ship feels like a tiny, self-contained planet drifting through a void. You realize that everyone on this vessel is running from something, a debt, a crime, a heart that wouldn't stop breaking. And in that shared flight, you are more human than you ever were on land. It is an unremarkable act of human warmth, this sharing of a pipe in the dark, but in the context of your frozen, hidden life, it means everything. As the moon climbs higher, casting a sigh, lava path across the water that looks like a road leading to nowhere, you feel the immense scale of time and the distance you have traveled from the person you used to be. The girl who cried over a torn dress is gone, replaced by someone who can navigate by the stars and face a rising gale without flinching. You watch the ember in the pipe glow and then fade, a tiny spark of heat in a vast, cold universe, and you feel a strange, melancholy pride in your own survival. The crew is a family of outcasts, bound together by the wood beneath their feet and the common enemy of the tide, and for tonight you are one of them. The irony is that you have found a community by becoming a lie, a paradox that sits heavy in your stomach like a swallowed anchor. You hand the pipe back to Barnaby, your fingers brushing his calloused hand, and the contact feels like a bridge built over an impossible canyon. The ship groans as it meets a larger wave, a gentle reminder that the peace of the night is only a temporary gift. Captain Thorne is a man made of sharp angles and a voice that carries the weight of a dozen winters at sea. A leader who reads the clouds better than he reads people. He begins to seek you out for the night watch, impressed by your silence and the way you handle the sextant with a delicate, natural precision. He speaks to you of his plans to strike the Spanish treasure fleet, his eyes bright with a feverish, desperate ambition that he hides from the more boisterous members of the crew. He trusts you with his maps and his doubts, believing he has found a loyal, stoic young man who understands the gravity of the life they have chosen. There is a heavy, bittersweet burden in being loved for a person who does not exist, a bond forming over a truth that Thorne will never actually hold in his hands. You watch him trace the lines of the Caribbean islands, his finger moving over the parchment with a reverence that makes you want to tell him the truth, just to see the mask fall. But the mask is your skin now, and you know that the moment you speak your real name, the trust would evaporate like mist under a noon sun, replaced by a violence or a pity that would be your undoing. The irony of history is that Thorne believes he is mentoring a future captain, a man who will carry on his legacy, while you are simply trying to survive the next hour without being discovered. He tells you about his daughter in Charleston, a girl he hasn't seen in 5 years, and his voice softens in a way that makes your own heart ache with a quiet, hidden recognition. He sees in you the son he never had, and you see in him the father who would have never let you leave the house if he knew what you were capable of. You stand beside him as the ship cuts through the warm turquoise waters of the tropics, the air thick with the scent of blooming jasmine drifting from an invisible shore. The weight of time settles on you both as you watch the sun rise, a blood-red light spilling across the deck and turning the white sails into sheets of flame. You realize that Thorn is an old man, tired of the chase and the killing, looking for a redemption that he will never find in a chest of Spanish gold. You want to offer him a small kindness, a word of comfort that isn't filtered through your assumed persona. But you remain silent, a ghost standing in the light. The trust between you is a fragile, beautiful thing, built on a foundation of shadows, a bridge that can only hold the weight of one person at a time. You watch him close his maps and head below deck, his shoulders slightly hunched as if the gold he hasn't even stolen yet is already weighing him down. The deck begins to bustle with the morning chores, the reality of the pirate's life returning with the heat of the sun. You, Tar, your place at the rail, the captain's secrets tucked away in your mind like stolen jewels. The Caribbean Sea is a sheet of beaten gold this evening, so still and transparent that you can see the shadows of sharks gliding through the reefs far below the keel. The seafarer is anchored in a hidden cove where the palm trees lean over the white sand like tired elders, their fronds whispering a language of peace you haven't heard in years. There is a shimmering, fragile tranquility in the air, the kind of calm that feels like a held breath, as if the world itself is pausing to remember what it was like before the fire. You sit on the deck, mending a tear in a spare sail, the needle moving through the heavy canvas with a rhythmic, soothing click against your thimble. A cook named Elias is roasting a wild pig on the shore, the smell of charred meat and tropical fruit drifting across the water to mingle with the salt. It is a moment of profound, quiet tenderness, an ordinary evening that you want to wrap your arms around and hold forever. The crew is relaxed, their weapons put away, their voices low as they trade stories of the fortunes they will spend when they finally reach a friendly port. You look at Thomas, who is laughing at a joke Silas told, his face glowing in the warm, orange light of the setting sun, and you feel a sudden, sharp urge to warn him. You know with a sadness the others cannot share that this peace is an illusion, a brief clearing in a forest of storms that is about to close in. The irony of history is that these men believe they are at the beginning of a great adventure, while you can feel the air thickening with a change that cannot be undone. You watch a single bird, a heron, take flight from the mangroves, its wings cutting through the heavy air with a slow, deliberate grace before it vanishes into the purple twilight. Go ahead and settle in, P. Wraps pull your covers a bit tighter, because the horizon is darkening now, and the stillness of the water is about to be shattered. You reach down and touch the rough wood of the deck, feeling the vibration of the ship as it shifts slightly in the current, a living thing that has protected your secret for so long. This is the last ordinary day, the final hour of a life where your only struggle was the wind and the waves, and you find yourself memorizing the exact shade of the sky. You want to tell the men to stay here, to never lift the anchor, to live out their days in this golden cove where the world can't find them. But the tide is already beginning to turn, the water whispering against the hull with a new, urgent frequency that speaks of approaching ships and the cold iron of the law. You put away your needle and thread, your hands steady, even as your heart begins to race with a premonition of smoke and salt. The sun slips below the horizon, leaving behind a bruise-colored sky and a silence that feels like an ending. The first star appears, cold and indifferent, marking the start of a night that will change everything. The morning does not break with light, but with the thunder of a British man-o'-war's broadside, a sound that vibrates through your very marrow and shatters the peace of the cove. The air is suddenly thick with the acrid, choking taste of black powder, a grey fog that rolls across the deck and turns the world into a chaotic blur of orange flashes and screaming wood. You find yourself at the midship cannon, your hands moving with a desperate, instinctive speed as you ram home the silk bag of powder and the heavy iron ball. The heat of the battle is a physical weight, a searing pressure that threatens to melt away the carefully constructed layers of your identity. In the frantic movement, your coat is torn and the bandages beneath your tunic begin to loosen, the fabric slipping as you heave against the weight of the gum carriage. You are a ghost fighting for its life, realizing that the chaos of the fire is the one place where your secret is most likely to be stripped bare. A splinter the size of a dagger flying from the bulwark catches Silas in the shoulder, and for a moment the world narrows down to the sight of his blood, staining the white sand on the deck. You abandon your post to pull him into the shadow of the hatch, your hands slick with the warmth of him, a small kindness in the middle of a slaughterhouse. He looks up at you, his eyes clouded with pain and the realization of his own mortality. And for a second, you think he sees past the grime and the hat to the person you really are. But the smoke swallows the moment, and you are forced back into the fray, the roar of the cannons drowning out any words that might have been spoken. This is the terrifying proximity of the end, where the boundary between life and death is as thin as the linen wrapped around your chest. You feel the immense, crushing weight of time, knowing that in minutes the history of this ship could be erased, leaving nothing but debris on the tide. The British ship looms over the seafarer like a mountain of white canvas and black iron, its crew preparing to board with a disciplined, cold ferocity that matches the pirate's desperation. You draw your cutlass, the cold steel a heavy weight in your hand, and stand beside Captain Thorne as the first grappling hooks bite into the rail. The irony is that in this moment of ultimate truth, you are more of a pirate than any of the men around you, fighting not for gold or glory, but for the right to remain a mystery. The first of the redcoats leaps onto the deck, his bayonet gleaming in the filtered light, and you meet him with a strength that surprises even yourself. The taste of the smoke is bitter on your tongue, the flavor of a world that is trying to burn you out of hiding. As the steel clashes and the deck becomes a river of red, you realize that the hardest thing to keep dry in a storm is your own history. The sun has begun to dip behind the jagged peaks of a nameless island, casting long, violet shadows across the splintered remains of the seafarer's deck. The air is thick with the scent of cooling iron and the heavy, sweet smell of tropical wood split open by cannon fire. You find yourself leaning against the base of the mainmast, your breath coming in ragged hitches, the linen bindings beneath your shirt soaked through with a mixture of seawater and a dull, blooming ache. Silas lies nearby, his breath a thin whistle, but it is Thomas who approaches you now, his face smeared with soot and a clarity in his eyes that makes your heart stumble. He does not look at your sword or your grime-streaked face. He looks at the way you are holding your side, the way the fabric of your disguise has finally betrayed the soft truth of your frame. In this quiet post-storm lull, the silence between you is not a void, but a bridge being built in the shadows of the rigging. He kneels beside you, his hands shaking as he offers a flask of water, his voice a mere thread of sound that barely carries over the groaning of the ship's hull. "I've known," he whispers, the words falling like small stones into a deep well, "since the night you showed me how to bind my hands." It is a breathless relief, a sudden shedding of a weight you have carried for thousands of miles, paired with a new, sharp terror that the world might suddenly end, because someone finally knows. You look at this boy, this apprentice of the sea, and see not judgment, but a fierce, protective kinship that transcends the laws of the land. He is a child of the gutter, and you are a daughter of a ghost, two shadows standing on a deck who have more power than 1,000 living men, because you share a truth the world cannot touch. The weight of time feels immense in this moment, as if the centuries of women who lived and died in silence are all exhaling through you at once. You realize that you were never as alone as you believed, that the ocean is full of people hiding in plain sight, carving out a life from the wreckage of their expectations. There is a small kindness in the way Thomas shifts his body to block the view of the surviving crew, a human warmth that, in the context of a pirate's life, feels like a holy act. He doesn't ask for your name, and he doesn't ask for your name, and he doesn't ask why you fled. He simply stays there, a silent sentry in the gathering dusk. The irony is that you found your truest ally not in the strength of the captain, but in the vulnerability of a boy who saw you when you were trying hardest to be invisible. As the stars begin to pierce the velvet sky, you feel the ship begin to move, again drifting away from the scene of the battle. The water ripples against the wood, a secret whispered from the deep to the surface. Gemini said, "The moon is a sliver of bone hanging over an oeer that has turned the colour of bruised plums, a vast and indifferent mirror for a soul that no longer recognizes its own reflection." You stand at the very edge of the bowsprit, the wood vibrating beneath your boots like the purr of a great salt-crusted beast, watching the white foam tear itself apart against the hull. The air here is colder, thinner, carrying the scent of icebergs drifting somewhere far to the north, a reminder that the world is much larger than the wooden boards of the seafarer. Behind you, the ship is a hive of low murmurs and the clinking of repair tools. But out here, there is only the wind and the terrifying, beautiful hollow of the horizon. You feel the weight of time pressing against your ribs, a sudden, heavy ache as you realize how many years have been swallowed by the rhythmic rise and fall of the swell. It has been so long since you walked on soil that didn't move, so long since you saw a dress drying on a line or heard the high clear ring of a church bell across a meadow. Those memories are like old coins worn smooth by the sea, their faces erased until they are nothing but weight without value. You find yourself gripped by a quiet longing for a port that does not exist, a place where you could walk into the light without the bandages, without the lowered voice, and without the constant electric fear of the news. It is a desire so ordinary it aches, to simply sit in the sun and be known by your mother's name, to let your hair grow long and feel the wind in it, without a hat to pin it down. But you know with a sadness that tastes like copper, that such a place was burned away the moment you stepped onto the gangplank in Bristol. You are a creature of the salt now, a woman who has earned her place among the sharks and the storms, and the land would only ever be a cage for a spirit this wild. There is a strange irony in your freedom. You have gained the world, but you have lost the right to occupy it as yourself. You watch a bioluminescent glow spark in the wake, tiny green ghosts flickering and dying in an instant, and you realize that your life is exactly like those sparks, brilliant, hidden, and entirely untraceable. Thomas passes you in the dark, his hand brushing yours in a fleeting, silent acknowledgement of the secret you now share, a small kindness that keeps the cold from reaching your bones. He doesn't say a word, and neither do you, for there are no words in the pirate's tongue for the kind of grief that comes from winning. The map in the captain's cabin has no name for the destination you are truly seeking, because there is no chart for a life lived in the margins of history. You turn your gaze back to the dark water, feeling the ship lurch forward into the spray. The stars are shifting overhead, rearranging themselves into patterns you have learned to trust more than any human promise. The Atlantic is a vast silver mirror, under the full moon, the water so calm that the ship seems to be gliding through the stars themselves rather than the sea. You are alone at the helm, the wood of the wheel smooth and familiar under your scarred palms, a silent witness to the years that have vanished into the wake. The crew sleeps below, their breath a collective rhythmic sigh that mimics the movement of the tides, leaving you as the sole guardian of the night. You look down at your hands, no longer soft, no longer the hands of the girl who burned her name in a Bristol tavern, but the hands of a person who has survived the impossible. There is a profound drifting peace in this moment, a surrender to the mystery of your own existence, as you realize that you're a story that was never meant to be told. The secret you carried is no longer a burden, it is the very fabric of your freedom, a hidden kingdom that only you can inhabit. You think of the women you might have been, the wife, the mother, the widow, and they feel like strangers from a book you read a lifetime ago. The weight of time is not a heavy thing tonight. It is a gentle cloak, a reminder that you have lived 100 lives in the span of one, all of them etched into the timber of this ship. The irony of history is that while the world remembers the names of kings and conquerors, it is the ghosts like you who truly know the shape of the horizon and the taste of the salt. You have found a legacy not in stone or ink, but in the enduring silence of the deep, a heritage of shadows and strength. Take one last slow breath and feel the stillness of the room around you, because the journey is almost over and the water is calling you home. The stars above are the same ones that guided you out of the harbour all those years ago, and they will be there long after the seafarer has returned to the earth. The ship groans softly, a sound of comfort rather than complaint, as it settles into a long, easy swell that carries you toward the dawn. You know that tomorrow will bring more storms, more battles, and more miles of empty ocean. But for now, there is only the moonlight and the hum of the rigging. You are a ghost at sea, a flicker of light in the vast darkness, and you are finally, completely at rest with the lie that became your truth. The world will never know your name, and that is the greatest victory of all, a quiet triumph that echoes in the hollow spaces of the hull. You lean against the wheel, your eyes growing heavy as the silver light begins to soften into the grey of the early morning. The waves wash over the hull, carrying away the names we were never supposed to remember, leaving only the endless, beautiful sea. The story doesn't end. It simply dissolves into the rhythm of the tide, a lullaby for a person who found themselves by vanishing.